Watch me as I make this. I play with some resin art colors, but I use my dry painting technique in a mold. Hang on. Hey everyone. Okay, you've seen me do some dry painting before on molds, and I've got a mold here. Let me see if I can describe it a little bit. It's a bowl, but what happens is that you have wings that wrap around. So the wings will come around to the side just a little bit. So you can see how it opens up in there. So it creates a little bowl. Now, of course, I can't find anything easy to work on. I always have to find challenging pieces, but if you know me well enough, you know that's what I do. I never go for the beginner projects. I always go for the advanced ones. That's the way I've always been. Kind of self-torture. Anyway, I use a lot of mica powders when I do my dry painting with the molds. And I thought I would try something a little bit different. Kind of an experiment. Since I am filling these guys up with resin, and this particular brand works really, really well in resin, I thought I'd try some dry painting with it as well. So I've got a light blue and a dark blue, and these both have different textures as far as mixing in with the resin. This one has a bit of a chunkier bit than this one is. It seems very coarse when compared to mica powders. Let me kind of go back and see if I can explain a little bit. Of course, I have to pick the darkest color. Hang on. These are from Resin here, and you can see how super fine these mica powders are. Now, the resin art ones seem like they're a little bit on the coarser side, but of course I'm picking one up that's dark, which doesn't help. There we go. We can get a little bit. So you can kind of see the coarseness of it, but they dissolve super fast in resin. And they're designed to do just that. And then she has one here that is from the Galaxy Diamond collection. And I'm just making sure they're settled down at the bottom before I open it up. And this one's even coarser than the previous one. But it is all micas. There's no actual glitter in them, but they do give off quite a bit of shimmer. So I thought I'd try both of these guys out, and since I'm doing, an experiment, I've also got some of her blingets, and this is the sparkle variation one, and the violet one. Okay, it's my favorite. This is my second bottle. I've gone through this one. This is super, super fine. So I don't know if this one's going to stick to the mold at all. It may just float around and collect at the bottom. So I'm not sure, but we're going to try. And this is another one from her Galaxy Diamond collection, Milky Way. But it also works really, really well with a bunch of different colors. I've only begun to start playing with this guy. So I thought this was a nice little ethereal kind of collection of colors. So here we go. Yeah, let's see, what am I gonna do here? I usually like to paint the ones on the surface first and then push in the colors into more of the crevices and stuff, because usually just automatically when you go, say if you had something on your finger, a dry powder, and you were to brush something really textural like this, it's going to automatically stick to the ones that are on the very surface first. So if you kind of plan for that, it makes it easier for everything else. Because if you were to try and do, okay, I'm going to do all these like flat planes here, and try to get into the crevices first, you're just gonna be fighting yourself. So, let's see. And now I gotta also think in reverse too. So what I might do is hit these crevices with the darker, maybe the darker color up here, and then slightly move it to the seafoam color, and then see if I can get some of the white and the bling it around the edges. I don't know, it's an experiment, so we're just gonna give it a try. So also what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my traditional tools that I've been doing with dry pigments, and that is basically my little silicone brushes. So to just simply dip into the powder and then use it as a rubbing tool. So that's what these guys look like. They're just, it's a little silicone nib. And get these at art supply stores. I got these so long ago, I used them for my trike, that I had put a Plasti Dip paint job on it, so that way I could do a Sharpie marker illustration on it. Yep, I said that. Let's see, I need paper towels. Okay. And then after I was done with my Sharpie marker illustration, I went in with some dry pigments and painted some detail colors in my illustration, which happened to be 3 dragon heads. So that was the purpose of getting the silicone brushes, because it just seemed to make sense to be able to grab them and rub them into the design. And they worked out rather well. So I'm happy with it. All right. So I've got 2 shape heads here. One that has a little bit of a flat, like chisel. And then this one is just a rounded cone type shape. And I seem to go back and forth with them all the time. So, and all I do is just simply dip it in. Let's see if this is even gonna collect on here. Yeah, it does. It does seem to be picking it up. Let's see. There's too much to focus on. Come on. I think this is the challenge of anybody who's doing videos. It does seem to pick it up. However, you saw a little bit fall off pretty easy. So I don't know what's gonna happen with the bigger flakes. We will find out together. So this is tricky doing this kind of painting on camera. I'm gonna do my best to keep myself within the camera. So bear with me, because I kind of want to get my face all over this as far as being able to see what I'm doing. It seems to be rubbing on really, really well. So that's a good thing. So just every so often when I find that there's not a lot to rub on, I go and do another dip, just to get a little bit more. Now this is gonna throw off, I don't know if you can see this, let's see. See how there's little speckles? Every so often you're gonna get that because you're flaking on a dry pigment. And you'll see me every so often kind of tip over the mold and kind of tap it out, and that's to get out some of the excess dots and stuff. But I don't mind the effect it gives when they are there. And this mold's pretty good as far as flexibility. I'm trying not to push it too much, but just enough that I can get some colors in there. Now I might be more mindful of the resin that I use in this one, and use mainly like leftover whites and golds and stuff like that, and pour that in there, so that way it does work with my colors. But usually a lot of my dry pigment molds, I will design them up so that there's a lot of color in them. And that way it doesn't matter too much as far as what kind of excess resin colors I pour into them. All right. So that should give a nice blue color there. I'm gonna tip this, see if you can see that. That is a nice little shimmer luster right now. And it's just me tapping it on the table a couple times. All right. I'm gonna rub this brush off on a piece of paper towel real quick, just to get off some of the excess. I'm not too worried about a lot of it, but some of it. All right, now this large flake, I don't know how it's gonna behave, so we will see. And if worst case scenario, it just sprinkles it here and there, that might be enough. The question is whether or not when you just pour resin on it without stirring, will it dissolve? If it does just, you know, sprinkle in chunks and stuff. So I have a feeling that we might have dots of color in there, or it might actually dissolve. I don't know, we'll find out together. Now the last two colors, because they'll be going into the crevices quite a bit, they're probably mostly going to be sprinkled in there because I don't want to stretch out the mold too much. But I definitely want to make sure that the white and the interference color, interference violet, gets really in there pretty good. Oh, it's going to be interesting. Now, Leslie with Color Art is really into these micas, which she uses for her colors. So she's got lots of videos out there talking about how she creates these colors and her product and stuff, and she's done a ton of research. So if you're curious, go give those a look, because I am not going to teach that because there is just too much info on that part. All I know is I really love the colors, and they make my resin artwork look very nice. Now, that's a whole lot of sparkle. And if I remember correctly, Leslie said this is made with all micas. So that's where the sparkle comes from. Okay, I'm wiping off this brush, and I'm gonna go to the next one. Let's see. I think I'm gonna do the interference one next with the brush application, because it looks like the Galaxy one does kind of sit on the surface. So I want to plan for this. This will go into the itty bitty cracks. I have a feeling, you see how loose that powder is? It also might stick on the surface, but because it's so fine, it'll go into the tinier cracks easier, and this one will lay on top. So that's my common sense thinking. Hopefully I'm not accurate. We'll see. I might go in when I'm done and just put a little bit of dark blue around, like when it gets closer to the top. I don't know, we'll see. Sometimes it's just getting into the motion. Okay, so I just dipped this guy in. I don't know if you can see this. Now, keep in mind my brush is already a little bit on the purpley side, but it definitely coated it well. Let's see, there it is. So that's hopeful. I'm just rubbing it into some of the areas down here. I'm also being mindful about how much gets in the air, because this stuff is super fine. And if I'm stirring up too much in the air, I might just go in very carefully, maybe, I don't know, sprinkle it in there more and move it around once it's in the mold. Because I don't want to breathe this stuff in. If you're in a small confined space, you might want to think about wearing a mask when working with the superfine powders, just to be careful. I'm in a very well ventilated area, and that helps a lot. I'm also trying to be careful not to rip my mold there by stretching it out. If your coloring skills are not very good, or coloring painting skills, you're not very confident with them, this is a really, really good way of doing something that looks highly detailed, and not have to worry about the color. The texture of the mold helps you out here, because it helps do some of the hard work by doing dry rubs. Dry rubs basically in painting paint with the texture. So this is basically a dry rub type of technique where you're rubbing the pigments against the texture. So the texture does the hard work for you. All right, there's a lot of sparkle going on here. So this might be a very good beginning project. Seems tedious, it looks hard, but it is not. You do a lot of detail-oriented stuff without a lot of skill involved. I mean, I'm only using 4 colors, and if you notice, I'm not really staying within the feathers. I'm kind of, moving the material around a lot. And just planning from kind of one edge to the other edge, but not real particular, like this has to stay in this region only. And when you do that, you end up with a result that you're a lot happier with, especially with this kind of technique, because otherwise it'll be really frustrating. Okay. So my little pointy thing is not picking up the next one very well. So I'm gonna rub that one off on my paper towel, and I'm gonna try my chisel one and see if I can get some bits of this guy. Okay. I think I'm scooping. See? Because I bet if I turn this, yep, it just falls in. All right. So I thought that might happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and plan for it, and I'm gonna just scoop some bits in. And if anything, we'll have this color at the very tip of the wings. And see what I mean by planning with my layers? Not a lot of skill involved, I'm scooping and dumping. See? So it should go into the very bottom area. And then some of the interference will pick up in the higher textures. I hope I'm making sense. Talking and arting is a challenge for me. It's one of those things like concentrating and doing your work is tough to do it out loud. This is definitely a coarser mica than the seafoam was. But that's okay. We will see how this works. So I'm kind of tapping also this in. Maybe it helps break up the micas a little bit. Let's see. Well, if anything, this is gonna be a sparkly set of wings. That much is for sure. All right, so I'm thinking here. See, told you, thinking on camera. Hard to do out loud. All right, I'm gonna go back to this sea foam and see if I can push some up against the sides here. And then I'm gonna finish it off with some of that darker blue color. Crud, which one is that called? Don't tip it over, Clara. Blue Moon, yes. So I'm trying to scoop it up in here and then smush it up against the side. That's what I'm trying to do. Don't know if I'm succeeding, but that's what I'm trying. I think I might, I don't know. I'm wondering if I should tap this out when I'm done. So I have a feeling there might be a lot of loose. And I don't want it to fill up the edges too much on the bottom where the resin won't get in there and won't get into the mold. That could be a problem too. I'm thinking about that as I'm working on this. All right. And going in here multiple times, I don't know if you can see this, I'm gonna pull this back. You see how the wings on this edge here, there's some kind of sparkle going on. So little bit by little bit, it's getting covered. Okay. Move that to the side so I'm not. All right, change of plans. I'm just gonna tap this out and get rid of some of the big chunks. Not a lot. I have a feeling quite a bit's gonna fall out. I'm giving it a little flex. Okay. That should be really interesting. I think enough is adhering to the mold that will be okay. I don't know if you can see this or not. See on this edge here? See how shimmery that is? It could be a little bit of what we're going to be expecting. Okay, so I'm going to pour my resin, and with the unmolding, we will both see together. Later. So here's this guy, he's all set in the mold, and I'm going to take him out in just a moment. I wanted to show you some, these are bubbles that came up. I had torched it a couple of times to remove it move the bubbles, and it did, but apparently these kept coming up. So what I'm going to do is give it a light sanding, and I might pour a little bit of resin on just this area here, just try to do what they call a dome coat. So that's where the resin will cover it up, but it doesn't go over the edge, so it just has this little floating layer. And that'll finish this off nicely. So now I'm gonna crack it out of the mold. All right, that took quite a bit of work. So the resin goes into crevices and it really grabs the mold really well. So if you saw me, I was starting to work and just very lightly remove it from each of the feathers. And I'm like, of course, when I got down to here, it was really having a good grip on it. And I just had to coax it little bits and little bits. And of course, it looked like I was really wrestling with the mold. Well, I kind of was. But I was still trying to be delicate enough. But look, check this out. That worked out really, really well. So very cool.